Governance is enormously important, and of course it's not just important for Africa, it's important in the rest of the world as well, and we shouldn't single out Africa in particular. But in my career I've lived in very many different countries around the world, and if one looks at what has proved successful in terms of development, the most critical element, I think, is governance. Of course, the behavior of corporations is important, but governance and the role of government in that governance is critical. The big question that I've always faced is what happens when you as a company are doing the sort of things that you should be doing, running proper operations, paying your taxes, being transparent, not bribing people, and yet governance fails. What is there that we can actually do about it? And I think there's been some progress in this over the last few years, which is encouraging. It's nice to see progress. And I think the progress is in an admission by companies that they cannot do it by themselves. No single company, or even a collection of companies, an industry association, can address these sort of problems by themselves. We need coalitions and alliances between companies, civil society, labor organizations, and government itself. And let me give you a couple of examples of how that works. The first is the United Nations Global Compact. That started off as a set of companies signing up to run their operations by the 10 principles representing four major groups of United Nations conventions on human rights, on the environment, on corruption, and on working places labor. But from its outset, part of the genius of Kofi Annan when he claimed the Global Compact was that he brought in civil society and labor organizations from the beginning. That organization is now widespread. It has something like 6,000 company signatories around the world. Over half of them are in developing countries. An initial criticism of the compact was that it was just voluntary, and these were just words. People signed up and didn't do anything. That's not true now, because companies, when they sign up, have to report on progress, do a communication on progress, which is public and can be evaluated by people. So that's a form of governance of the compact, if you want. And if people don't do that, if companies don't do that, they are delisted from the compact. And we've delisted, I think, about 1,000 companies from the compact. I should mention I'm on the board of the Global Compact. But the most important part of the Global Compact's activities is, I think, their local networks. And we have local networks in something like 90 countries. Now, they don't all operate perfectly. Some of them are in development. Some of them have fallen into mild disuse, as it were, inactivity. But more than half of them, I think, are either very active, and probably another quarter are in the process of development. And these local networks are absolutely fundamental, because they bring together small companies, local companies, international companies, the affiliates of major global companies, labor organizations, civil society organizations, local civil society organizations. And they bring them together to set priorities, which in that country are the most critical elements for work. Is it human rights? Are the big problems corruption? Are they environment or working conditions, for example? And unfortunately, of course, in some countries it's all of those. But nonetheless, generally you can set priorities and then decide how to tackle it. And the way of tackling it in a country is then very practical. And because it's not just business talking, if just business talks, human nature being what it is, things will get skewed in the direction, the advantage of business. If it's just civil society also has its agenda, so it gets pushed in that direction. By having them all together, and labor unions are the same, by having them all together, we keep each other honest, I think, and keep focused on the goal, which is development. So I think I commend to you, as a thought of ways of governance, these alliances and coalitions in things like the Global Compact, with an emphasis on clear and transparent reporting as to what is being done. Now, one of the criticisms, as I mentioned earlier, of the Global Compact and other voluntary initiatives is that they are just voluntary. And many civil society organizations feel that unless we have some kind of global legislation with teeth, companies and others are going to get away with things. Global legislation and global governance is mighty difficult to implement. It's difficult to enforce. We know from difficulties with the International Criminal Court, which does work, but slowly and with difficulty. It can certainly work in the case of trade things which need to be regulated through the WTO and so on. And clearly